is for those of us who would prefer to avoid conflict in our relationships and really getting honest with ourselves about how it could be so destructive to do that, and then talking about ways we can lean into conflict that are not so scary. And I'll leave the information about references in the description box below so that you have it. And also just keeping in mind that when I'm talking about these ways to avoid conflict with couples, that of course you can also apply this to other interactions in the workplace and also other personal relationships. So starting off with what conflict is, when we think about it, it's just two opposing opinions having a disagreement and facing it and getting honest about it. And when we think about why we would avoid doing that, it's usually because we are associating it with something that's unsafe. And when we go back to our childhood and we think about how we were first exposed to education around anger or disagreements, that we are presented in a certain way. And if during your childhood you were witnessing tension or arguments and people were yelling, or there was escalation to physical violence, that it would make sense that you would do everything you can to avoid conflict in your adulthood because you don't want to repeat that experience. And so when you look at your adulthood, maybe you have repeated those patterns in the past, or you've gone into the other extreme of just avoiding conflict altogether. And so when we think about how this becomes destructive, we can look at different ways that people end up having consequences to avoiding the conflict, and that could be implosion or explosion. Implosion would be ways that we act in, so it could be holding on to resentments, it could be sitting there with passive aggressiveness, it could be where we are holding on to contempt, or we end up being self-destructive. Some people engage in self-harm behaviors or medicating their feelings and escaping their feelings because they don't want to address the situation that's happening. It could be ways of acting out and raging and really expressing frustration, maybe having impatience with your children when you're actually really frustrated about something that your partner's doing. So noticing these really destructive consequences that are happening when we are avoiding having this confrontation. And there is a very skillful researcher by the name of Dr. John Gottman, and he does extensive research on couples. He's been doing that for decades. He has something called the Love Lab, and he will observe couples having a conversation for a few minutes, and based on their tone of voice, the delivery, the way that their body language is, their heart rate, he monitors their breathing changes, he can predict over just a few minutes of observation whether or not these couples will stay together or if they will divorce, which I think is pretty fascinating. So when you look at those kinds of interactions, when sarcasm is present, when there are ways of dismissing or watching the delivery be very resentful or disrespectful, or if things are escalating to the point of yelling, that it is this predictor of what's going to happen long term in the relationship. So going back to ways that we end up avoiding and looking at conflict, the consequences can lead to the fact that problems will grow in the relationship if you don't address them. And looking at how people can also get blindsided. So if a partner has not confronted the situation, then all of a sudden they're going to explode because the problem has been growing. Then the other person in the relationship is going to be blindsided, having no idea that there's been an issue whatsoever this whole time. There's also watching the sarcasm and noticing how that is sideways anger. We call it sideways anger in psychology. And it's because it's something that is still using humor to cover up something that is real underneath. It's a very real issue, an honest issue that the person is having, but they're not being direct about it. So when we talk about leaning in to conflict in ways that are healthier, it's really about creating new associations with addressing these issues. And we have to start with mindfulness and being present. And so when you think about mindfulness, it's about paying attention on purpose in the present moment and being non-judgmental. So you're really being in that present moment with the other person, really listening to what they're saying, and you're slowing down the conversation and creating a new association of safety. So really being able to take care of yourself on your side of the street with your boundaries, and being able to say to yourself, validating your own feelings and not needing the other person to validate your feelings, but knowing that you have a right to your opinion, a right to your perspective, and to slow down and use that talking boundary to deliver your message and face it with vulnerability. It's going to be awkward, but being able to risk being awkward for the sake of having long-term repair. So it'll be initially uncomfortable, but really working towards being able to grow together and to inform the person about what's going on so that there's even an opportunity to repair. So part of this is really slowing down and being able to take that time to take care of your feelings, and also noticing the power that you have on your side of the street to de-escalate the situation, to really notice whenever you start instigating or when you're pulled in by them instigating, and knowing when you can slow the conversation down, and also of course knowing when it's necessary to stop the conversation if things get too heated, and being able to take a pause and then revisit it at another time. So I hope that this was helpful in terms of just looking at addressing conflict in a different way and being able to lean into it in a safer way. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.